As I started off to say, I was surprised this morning. I didn't know we were going to be doing more bows. So I've gotten in my cardio for the day. But good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you here online and in person. It's faces I haven't seen in some time, so it's nice to see you all the way down in Georgia. My name is Mukei. I am one of the senior students here at the Village Zendo. And as I said in one of the former Dharma talk I shared with you, isn't it great about Zen that we can sit in the most interesting places? Like an alley. We're sitting in an alley. And across the street from where the Zendo is a building in which Robert De Niro hosts his film festival. But just think, they're sitting in an alley. And this space is interesting because prior to our coming here, many, many years ago, this was a nightclub. It's called Madame Rosa. And before that, it was called the Tribeca Club, Blackbird, which resembled a palm reader's salon. And it hosted bands and guest DJs. And the rumor has it that Prince was in the alley in his limo while his band, The Revolution, played in here. So if you've ever been to the Zendo, you begin to wonder where exactly the Revolution played. But I just think about the stories that have taken place in this nightclub and this Zendo and in this neighborhood, and about the Buddha. The Buddha had many stories before he became the Buddha. Most of us are familiar with the story of his being a prince born into royalty and whose father had saved him from, wanted to spare him rather, from sickness and death and old age. But how he got away and took on an ascetic lifestyle that almost killed him until he came to his senses. And he began and he sat under a Bodhi tree. And in a sitting, he became the Buddha, the enlightened one. But that's the abridged version. There are many other stories about the Buddha before he became the Buddha. They were called the Jakata Tales, the Jakata stories. The oldest of the Pali canon, which go back to 500 CE. And there is listed about 547 of these tales. There might be more, but they've been lost over time. And in those stories, the Buddha takes on the appearance of an animal, a human, a spirit, or God, all with the intention of perfecting his character and deep wisdom. In these tales, though, he's not beyond life's challenges. The tales make it clear that the stuff that you and I sit with or deal with every day, that the Buddha in his day also dealt with. So I wanted to share one of those tales with you. It's called the Bhallatiya Tale, number 504. Long ago, the Bodhisattva, and it's interesting in all the tales, the Buddha is not the Buddha, he's called the Bodhisattva, lowercase, not bigger case. So that says something about all of us in this room, all of us Bodhisattvas, lowercase, we're going to a bigger case. His name was Bhallatiya, and things were not going smoothly for him. He decides that he needs a break from the complexities of work and home. And one night he leaves the palace and heads off alone with a pack of hounds to go hunting in the mountains. Beneath the stars, alone with his dog, with his campfires, weapons, and skills, he feels renewed. So he stays out there enjoying his newfound freedom and peace. One day he hears the sound of two people, clearly a man and a woman, sobbing. telling his dogs to stay so as not to frighten the two, he heads up the mountain. Here he is again, a king, someone who knows about issues and problems and now compassionately only seeks to help. He discovers not two people, but a handsome male and a beautiful female, Kinara, delicate, half human, half bird beings with their arms around each other in tears. He asks, "What is your anguish? What is the cause of your anguish?" They tell him that while they wish to be always together, never parted, one night the river rose so rapidly in a storm that they were separated by a flash flood. "I have gone to gather flowers to deck our nightly bow," sobbed the male, and was trapped on the river other shore. "It was impossible to cross that flood," sobbed the female. "All we could do was run along the opposite banks, calling to each other through the night. For the first time ever sundered, kept apart. This is why we weep." The king says, "I don't remember any heavy rains recently. When did this happen?" They answered, 697 years ago. The pain of that night has never left us." "How long do you live?" he asks. 1,000 summers, they answered, never aging or experiencing ill health until one day we just fade away painlessly, like the scent of perfume or the flowers fading on the wind. Stunned, the king backs away, the hair prickling along his neck. Even 700 years have passed, he thinks, and yet one night of separation they still weep. He gathers his hounds and weapons and heads for home. He feels that he's been gone from this place and his people quite long enough. Odd encounters with non-humans. Literature is filled with them. Kinnaras are part of Buddhist and Hindu mythology, patrons of music and dance, and they are part of the Buddhist cosmos. Today we might call Kinnaras aliens. Just think of sci-fi or UFOs. But Kinnaras, Nagas, Gudaras are all part of the planet's ecosystem. Let's spend some time with this story. The pre-Buddha is a king and also a hunter. He has weapons and hounds, but like most of us, he's tired and he wants to take a break, so he leaves his home. So he decides to go on a retreat. He heads off alone with his dogs and weapons and lives beneath the stars in a campfire. Suddenly he hears crying, and suddenly he's the king again. Familiar with issues, so he responds with a question. What is the cause of your anguish? Important question for us in practice. What is the cause of this suffering? Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, immigration, food and water inconsistency everywhere, and more. The Kinnaras answered that they can no longer be together. They are separated for 700 years. By a flash flood, a downpour, they are devastated. We, like the Kinnaras, are hit by the human condition. The knowledge that's seemingly permanent is fading away. We fade away like the scent of perfume or flowers fading on the air. The Buddha in his fire sermon said, "O monks, this world is on fire with fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance." Imagining that we are separated from everything causes much pain. The world is on fire. Similarly, in the Lotus Sutra, one of the other texts in Buddhist scripture, is the story of the burning house, in which a rich man is living in a decaying demon-filled house which catches on fire. and his children are totally absorbed in playing games and are not aware of it. Truth is, no matter how we yearn for permanence, no matter what securities we gather around us, we are impermanent. No one thing lasts forever. Even the wise person here among us and online knows that. Yes, that is true, but to acknowledge it is difficult. The Canara's anguish helps the king. The retreat is not going to. The retreat is not going to get it. There's nothing with a retreat. There's nothing wrong with a retreat that we all need time to restore ourselves. We can't stay. The retreat does not resolve the things that wakes us up at night. The Kanara shows the Bodhisattva king, the Bodhisattvas here present, that life is precious and time does not wait. Things we don't want to happen will happen. We must find peace and freedom where we are, or where we will be. The Kanara's mourning 700 years. How long have they been separated? The king decides to retreat, returns to retreat. But he knows he has his kingdom to return to and to do his best. In the end, that's all of us. In the end, I'll repeat that, that's all we can all do, is to do our best. We have all been retreating this morning in an alley, but we've been changed. Think for a moment. How do we find peace in the great flux of life? How do we find peace in the great flux of life? The haiku I'll leave you with this morning is, cherry blossoms scatter at the peak of their beauty. It is much harder for us to fall away from our own attachment to the world.